Well, you're here. I'm an alcoholic. My name's Jim. Told me I had to tell the truth. That's the truth. I was hoping there'd be some more birthdays. That's friggin' amazing. Give me less time to worry about what I was gonna say. And all. It's kind of amazing for an alcoholic like me that I've been able to come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and stay from the very beginning. Excuse me. And day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. And I haven't had to go back out and experiment again. But that's the only thing I've done perfect in the last 25 and a half years is not pick up the next drink. Because the rest of my life at times has been a shit show. Because life's life. We'll go back to the beginning. My sobriety date is 10/10/2000. So this last November, I got the benefit from AA and my higher power and all the people in the rooms of receiving 25 years of continuous sobriety, which is a blooming miracle as far as I'm concerned. For a drunk like me to be able to stay sober 25 minutes, let alone 25 years. That's a quarter of a century. It's unreal. And the other thing that because of that, I've had the marvelous opportunity, whether I like it at times or not, is because I come into the rooms of AA and stayed and got sober and learned how to be honest and tell people the truth and listen to instructions. I've gotten to get older. So in just over a month, I turned 71 years old, which I never dreamed would have ever happened. In fact, I was pretty sure it wouldn't happen because the way I was living my life, I didn't care whether I lived or died. I started drinking at a real young age. I had some memories that I think were transplanted from people that were around me, my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my sisters, that told me while I was growing up. But my first planned memory of getting drunk was when me and 7 of my buddies stole enough booze to start of one summer to get drunk. Anyhow, that's what I know I was going to do. And that's what I did is I got drunk. And the 8 of us, all of our birthdays were within 4 or 5 months of each other. The sad thing about it, there were 3 of us already dead by the time any of us reached 21. And all 3 of them deaths could be or should have been attributed to alcohol because alcohol was involved in all 3 of them. I'm very fortunate for my drinking. I never got 86 from a bar. I never got thrown in jail because of my drinking. But, the other side of that coin is I got escorted to the city limits of a town by 4 cops as they were fondling their weapons, told me never ever bother to come back to their city again. So, it comes and it goes. I used to have a route of bars that I drank at because I never knew what was going to happen when I drank. And I'm really fortunate because back when I was doing my drinking, motels, gas stations, and bars always gave out matchbooks. And they always had their address and their phone number. It was advertisement. And I used to collect them. I didn't use them. I collected them so I knew where I'd been. So I wouldn't go back there for a while so it would cool off a little bit because I never knew what happened. Because once I drank to a blackout from the very beginning. That's the only reason why I ever drank was for the benefit of blacking out. I learned years later, finished learning it when I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, that me blacking out was the way I shut down my whirling disease between my ears. And I've had that ever since I was born. I've had the fortunate dealings to have to figure out and understand that from the time I was born, I didn't believe I belonged. I didn't fit in anywhere. And I learned over the years, part of that reason was I was a cesarean baby. So I wasn't normal. I wasn't normal from the very start. And my dad had issues with it. My mom had issues with it. And I heard all kinds of the horror stories and everything else. But that was part of the issue. But my best pal, my best buddy, the person that I could always turn to was that bottle of booze. And every time I turned to that bottle of booze, it'd give me the relief I needed and wanted. No matter where I was, who I was with, I could drink enough to black out. You know, when we read in Alcoholics Anonymous, we read about drinking like normal people. I never ever wanted to drink like normal people. There's no fun in that. I want to sit and then set it back down and let it sit there until it gets warm. Not me. I got one in this end. You can guarantee this one's got one waiting because that's how I drink. I was the original twofer guy. Always had to have one more. And like I said, I drank for a lot of years. And I drank until alcohol quit giving me the relief that it had always given me. It quit shutting this down. I couldn't drink enough to quiet my mind, to give me any relief. So I drank for another year and a half. In fact, I drank harder than I was before, which is totally friggin' amazing looking back at it. Because I'd go to bed with a jug and I'd wake up with a jug. And I'd switch off jugs during the day because that's how I drank. And lo and behold, after a year and a half, this marvelous guy that was raised in the generation of, real men fix things and real men don't cry. That's what I was taught from the time I was a little kid. So when my best friend alcohol quit giving me the relief it had always given me, I'm going to fix this. Well, what did I do? I quit drinking. Bang. Didn't drink no more. 30 days later, I was on my way to prison because alcohol made me fit for human consumption. Because without alcohol, you guys wouldn't want to be around me, especially at the end. But I ended up going to prison. And that saved my life. That literally saved my life. Because by going to prison, I got introduced, it took a while, but I got introduced to a crazy program called Attitude Adjustment by my first sponsor in AA in a prison cell after lockdown. So I couldn't run away. I couldn't hide. I was there for the duration. And like he told me, he says, you don't change your attitude, you're going to end up doing life on the installment plan until they throw the key away, like they're doing with me, because he was doing life. And he was never ever going to get out. And he never ever did get out. But he died sober. He died sober. The other thing, I'm going to fast forward and bring something in at this point. One of the biggest blessings I get from the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous nowadays is every once in a while I get to go up to Montana State Prison and take a meeting into the prison, which is an honor and a privilege to me. But I will tell you this, and there's a person in this room that's gone on them journeys with me, two of them, in fact, and they know how it affects me. The closer we get to the prison, the more the hair on the back of my neck stands up. And in my mind, even though I know better, been so many years since I was in there, I wonder if they're going to let me out. And it really amps up when you get in there and they open up the first crash gate. And that's a sound, once you hear it, you never ever forget it. And lo and behold, we do the meeting. Sometimes we do 2 meetings. Then they let us back out. And by the time we walk from the Wallace building out to the parking lot, the hair on my back and my neck is finally settled back down. Every time. And it's an honor and a privilege to go up there and do that for them guys. You know, I never know when I get up here and talk what I'm going to talk about, other than one thing I guarantee every person in this room, I got to guarantee you that I can give you that if you do, you never ever have to worry about drinking again. Just don't pick it up. It's that simple. Don't take the next drink. It's simple to say. And I wished I could wave a magic wand and go ding, 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 you're all cured. But it don't work that way. Each and every one of us has to walk our own journey. And sometimes them journeys get awful ugly. My youngest boy, I dearly loved the little son of a gun, finally made it into the rooms of AA several years ago. But when he was younger, after I went to prison and got out of prison, I had to tell him he couldn't come around me anymore because my PO could show up at any second on my doorstep and knock, knock. And I opened the door and she'd walk in. And she had that right. And I had to tell him, you can't come around anymore because I never knew what was going on in his life. Several years later, I was sitting in the rooms of the High Noon group where it meets right now. In that corner where the elevator is now, it didn't used to be there. And the door to the room used to be in the back corner. And I always sat in one of the first two chairs there. And this young man walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was my baby boy. And he was able to get some time. But he couldn't stay. He couldn't stay. And he tried, but he never ever was able to stay past 88 days. And the first time he got 88 days, he got pissed off at Alcoholics Anonymous because how dare Alcoholics Anonymous not give him his 90-day chip? He earned it. He did. And I understand that thinking because that's how I would think. That's exactly how I would think. But shortly after that, he ended up dying from this disease. And that sucked. Luckily for me, I was out in Clinton working at the time with my partner in a business. And he knew something was wrong because as soon as I picked up my phone and heard the first few words, I unbuckled my tool belt, threw my tool belt on the floor, threw all my tools on the ground and started walking towards my pickup. And he hollered at me what the hell was going on. And I said, I got to go. And it's a good thing there were no cops on the road that day because they would have wrote me a million tickets. I couldn't pick up the phone and call anybody I knew because I never really had developed that habit. I'd race clean across town to go to a meeting because so-and-so is going to be there so I could talk to them. But pick up the phone and call somebody, I couldn't do it. And part of the reason was all my years in prison, because when you called people, they had to collect calls, and I never ever wanted to be a bother. So I raced to town and I come to a meeting, and the people in AA swarmed around me and held me up. They helped me hold a memorial, in fact, in this room for my son. And a lot of people in the rooms knew my son. Excuse me. You know, and I was pissed off. I was pissed off at my higher power. I was pissed off at AA. I was pissed off at the world. And I was also pissed off at him. Why in the hell couldn't he get it? Why in the hell couldn't he get it? If I could get it, why couldn't he? Well, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. And over the years, I finally got to the point, well, I can accept he's in a better place for him. Still sucks sometimes. At least nowadays, you know, I don't drive around town looking at all the places because he was homeless and he didn't care that he was homeless. He was okay being homeless, which I never could understand. But I don't drive around town nowadays checking out all the camp spots that he used to use anymore. and he's in a better place for him. You know, been around the rooms for a while, so, you know, I've gone through the steps quite a few times. I've had a few different sponsors. I've gone through the steps one way or another with every new sponsor I've ever had. I've got several friends in the rooms of AA that are just as good as a sponsor for me. Because I know for a fact when I talk to those people, they love me and care enough about me to be totally and completely honest. In other words, they'll step up to the plate and tell me that I'm going to be very blunt and to the point. Pull my head out of my nether regions and take a breath. Because that's what I need to do sometimes. I may not agree with them. In fact, most of the time I don't. I'll be quite honest about it. Sometimes I get really pissed off at them. How dare you suggest that? But eventually it sinks in and I get to do it. You know, I wished I could say, you know, at 25 and a half years of sobriety, that my life's hunky dory and I'm perfect. But I'd be lying to you if I did. Because life still sucks at times. You know, some of the very basic things they taught me when I first come into AA was romance and finances. The two ugly topics in the rooms of AA. For me, it's not so much the romance, it's the relationships, period, with any other human being. And finances. You know, I was raised in a family that was always living from paycheck to paycheck. Both mom and dad worked, but we lived from paycheck to paycheck. So there was always robbing Peter to pay Paul. So that's what I learned. And that's how I still live my life a lot of times. And I learned many, many years ago that one thing this gentleman does not do if he wants to stay above ground is get a credit card. And lo and behold, I did. And lo and behold, it didn't take very long for me to max it out, max it out, max it out. Keep thinking I could figure it out. Keep thinking I could figure it out. And I never could figure it out. So I had to go into American Debt Relief, which means I'm on a very strict, tight budget, and hopefully it'll work out. But maybe in 16 more months, I'll be able to breathe again because I cannot not work. The other thing that happens, you know, you get into AA and, you know, there's people that I get to give coins to in this room. And yesterday I got to give a very special one out because she's one of the people that I really pay attention to when she talks because some way or another, she always keeps AA really simple and to the point. No matter what, don't drink. And that's one of the things that I keep grasping a hold of. That's the only thing I know for sure. If I don't drink, I got a chance. I got a choice. By not drinking, I might, if I've worked the steps and learned how to be responsible, upright human being by doing the steps, because that's what the steps teaches. You know, they talk about it in the rooms of AA. Them 12 steps are living life 101. Because for most of us, when we walked into the rooms of AA, I know, I shouldn't say most of us, I pretty much guarantee that very few of us, if any of us, knew how to live life sober when we walked into the rooms. We knew how to live life as a drunk. And that's how we kept trying to live life, and it doesn't work. Luckily, them 12 steps, them 12 crazy steps. Because when I first come into the rooms of AA, walking up to my first meeting at the High Noon Group, I heard this friggin' laughter. I couldn't figure out why them people were laughing. And that was back when they were in the children's theater. And I walked in there and there was something going on in that room that for some reason I wanted. couldn't figure it out, didn't understand it. Because you know, I'm not an alcoholic. I don't drink like you losers drink. Because I wasn't drinking. I hadn't drank for 12 years. Because after I went to prison, I never took another drink, but I never worked a program. So I spent 12 years in prison on a dry drunk, hating myself anyhow. And I should have bought it, but my good buddy Jack gave me a dog tag. He worked in the print shop and he printed me up a dog tag to remind me of my nickname and what I had a license to do. I had a license to chase fart bombs. And my nickname was Bow Wow. And that's what I was known as in prison. And I lived up to it. In fact, for quite a few years, it's a miracle that I didn't spend any time in Max because I had a serious attitude problem. A very, very serious attitude problem because I hated myself and I hated the world. Because that's what my life had boiled down to. I'd ended up doing things in my life that I never dreamed another human being could do, but I did them. And the sad thing about it, one of the things I hated was the fact that I did service for my government, my military. And I did things when I was in the military that nobody should have to do, but I did it. And at the time I did it, I was proud to do it because that's what I was told I needed to do. You know, it was a right or wrong, I don't know. Part of me believes the world would have been a lot better if they'd have finished the job totally and completely once they started it, but that's my opinion. And opinions are like rear ends. Everybody has them. Most of them stink at least once in a while. And that's another thing that I get to work on. The 6th and 7th step reminds me on a daily basis, such things as my very, very dark humor and my language, which is very blunt and to the point. But you know, like I said earlier, I wished I could wave my magic wand and make all of you sober where you could stay sober. All the birthdays, God, freaking amazing. I lost track of how many of them there were, but there was a bunch of them. And each and every one of you are a miracle. Because the average drunk don't come walking into these rooms and get sober. It takes a special drunk to come into the rooms and get sober. And I mean special because you got to be willing to want it. Alcoholics Anonymous will work for anybody if they want it bad enough. No matter what, it'll work for anybody on alcohol if you want it bad enough. But all the miracles are the ones that stay and keep. And if you don't stay, you keep coming back. And I hope anybody in this room, you don't go back out there and drink. But if you do, come back. Hopefully you'll survive. Because you might not. I got some good friends in these rooms that's been in and out a few times. And it's amazing that they've survived. And they get to keep coming back. And so far, they're able to stay again. Because, you know, one of the things that never gets talked about anymore, used to be talked about a lot. When I first come into the program, you know, it's called the wet brain. They used to talk about it very bluntly and very much to the point. You drink enough booze that all that's left of your life is they get to pour stuff down your throat and it comes out the other end and you don't even get to enjoy it while it's there because you become a wet brain. That's if you're lucky. The other part of that is you die. Hopefully you don't end up killing somebody in the process. That's the hard, cold truth of this disease we have. Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholism. Not wasn't. It's always going to be here for me. And the ism, I, self, and me. But also the ism part of it, I sponsor me. And I'm really good at that at times. My sponsor's sitting over there laughing at me because he knows the truth. Couple friends sitting back there laughing at me because they know the truth. It takes me a little while to hear things because I think I know what I'm doing. I think I got it figured out. Luckily for me, I never have had to go back out and take another drink. I've never had to do that. I don't even think about it anymore. And it's, it's not because I fear alcohol. I know exactly what alcohol is. But for this alcoholic, I'm very fortunate because when alcohol quit working for me, literally quit working for me, and I tried for another year and a half to make it work, it still wouldn't work for me. It still wouldn't give me that relief that I'd always chased. There's no way in hell I'd ever go back to alcohol because I know it won't work. And luckily for me, that was a big factor when I finally got into the rooms of AA that made it where I could accept Alcoholics Anonymous the way it is and dove into it with both feet as best as I could. And like I said, and I've said more than once, I don't do it perfect. I do it to the best of my ability. 6 and 7 has become very prevalent in my life here recently. Because it's one of them things, the times I've done the steps, it's real fast and easy to go through that part of the book because it's really short in that part of the book and everything. We're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. Yeah, I'm ready. God, here, have. But that's not what six step means, I've found out. The 6th step means I have to act on it. I have to do something, not just say, here. I got to work very specifically and very hard with each character defect to give them away. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I've found over the years, the only character defect I've been able to give away and not drag back into my life one way or another has been drinking. Everything else comes back into my life one way or another. Nowhere near as bad as it used to be. Nowhere near as bad as it used to be. But every time I clean up one mess and think I got it figured out, a little while later, here it is again. And it's at a different level because I'm at a different level. I've grown. And that's the other thing, it's really easy to stop drinking. We've all done it. Some of us more than once. Some of us way more than once. What's the hard part is to stay stopped. But see, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I only have to do it 24 hours a time. Sometimes only 1 minute at a time. But whatever I do to get that 1 minute or that 24 hours works great for that time frame. As soon as that 24-hour rolls over and a new day starts, guess what? I got to do something again. And odds are, anyhow, for me, it's going to be different because what worked yesterday for my sobriety may not work as good today as what worked yesterday. I'm going to have to grow a little bit. They used to talk about change when I first come into the rooms because people, I don't know about anybody else in this room, but I imagine quite a few of you don't like change. I didn't when I first come in. I still don't at times, but I was told back then, change is inevitable. It's going to happen. Get used to it because that's the only way you're going to grow. And if you're not growing, you're sliding backwards, period. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. If you're not moving forward, you're going backwards. I've seen it happen to too many people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and watched it happen in my own life. Not with alcohol, but with everything else. That if I'm not working on it and not taking care of it, pretty soon I'm sliding back. I can turn out to be the same blooming asshole, the same guy that needs an attitude adjustment as I did when I first crawled into the rooms of AA, as I can today at 25 plus years. You know, it's still amazing that a drunk like me can get a quarter of a century. There's some people sitting in this room today that were in some of my very first meetings. In fact, a couple of them instigated me getting roasted for my 50th birthday, because I got to turn 50 in the rooms of AA. And I still have the little jailbird that they put on my cake topping and the fingernail file that they put so he could file his way out the door. I still have it. You know, but that's the kind of friends I have today. That's the kind of friends I have today. You know, and I know I've heard how you're not supposed to tell somebody when you speak at speaker meeting because you'd be bragging. Well, I hate to tell you that I told a few people. And one of the reasons why I told them people is I knew they would be here, and I knew by seeing them in the rooms, they would make me be honest, no matter what. And if I'm not, I guarantee you, I will hear about it. I will hear about it. You know, the other thing that I get to enjoy because I've come into the rooms and standard rooms, I used to be able to come to a meeting every day. And because of my choices and everything, I can't do that right now. I have to go back to working full time. But because of COVID, I can't work a regular job because I don't have no energy. I don't have no stamina. Luckily for me, I found something that I can do. I DoorDash. And I can do that on my own schedule. But I still had to accept the fact that, hey, if I'm going to make a living at it, guess what? I got to work it as a job. And I didn't want to. I wanted to pedal. I wanted to play. But I have to start working it as a job. So I got to start doing it 40 hours a week. Hopefully my truck holds out. Hopefully gas prices don't go any higher. You know, da-da-da-da-da. But I'm going to keep doing it to the best of my ability. And you know, the other thing, because of choices I made between relationships and finances, I don't have no choice but to work. Because if I don't work, my retirement won't cover my bills. And if I don't work, I don't have a roof over my head. I don't have food on my table. It's that simple. And nobody in this room put me there. Nobody in my life put me there, but the guy that I go stand in front of the mirror and look at every morning. I'm the one that did it. Nobody twisted my arm to do what I've done. You know, here 2 months ago, Stanley was talking about how he was having a hard time finding people to speak at the speaker meeting. So after the meeting, I volunteered. I said, well, you know, I'm here most days, so if you need somebody, I'm here. Well, here 2 weeks ago, I had a deal come up with my landlord that my landlord needed me to work for him for a day for the weekend. And it was last weekend. So 2 weeks ago, I went up to Stanley and I said, hey, I'm not going to be here over Mother's Day weekend. And he looks at his phone and he goes, but you can be here the 17th, can't you? And I go, well, sure. He says, well, I'll text you. And he forgot to text me. But that's okay. Because that's the other thing that I've learned from AA. when I give my word, I do my absolute best to carry through with it. You know, one of the other things that's happening this year again is there's going to be a Founders Day picnic in Missoula, Montana. Not the camp out, the picnic. Because that was something that was very, very important to me when I first got into the rooms. It was something that meant a lot to me. It was something I could go do. All the little extra little things that the groups used to do and everything. So there's flyers out and people will be talking about it and everything else. So we get to have that again. And you know, it's not much. You get to go to a crazy ass park in Missoula, Montana with a bunch of crazy drunks. And you get to have some barbecue and the kids get to run around and bounce off the swing sets and the horseshoe pits and whatever else goes on. And nobody gets in trouble. And everybody gets to have a good time. You know, that's the important thing. I get to be part of the human race again. When I was drinking, I wasn't. Because my drinking was the most important thing in my life. And whatever I had to do to make sure I could do that. And then if anything was left over, the rest of the world got a piece of it. I always worked while I was drinking. I'm a workaholic. I like working. It keeps me out of up here. But, I've found since I've got older, I can't work the same kind of jobs I used to work, but I still can be of service to other people. I still get to suit up, show up, and do the next right indicated thing. My higher power had his fingers in my life when I got COVID, I believe. Because he had planned it. I was going to end up with long COVID. And I wasn't going to have any stamina to keep working the kind of jobs I was used to working. Because I could go do them jobs and not care, not have tolerance, and not be of service. So he stuck me with long COVID. So I've had to learn how to do a job where I got to be tolerant of everybody. Because I get to drive in Missoula, Montana, which is interesting to say the least. And I won't say all the time, but quite a lot of the time, I'm not flipping people off. I'm not cussing at people. I haven't chased anybody down and yanked them out of their rig and threatened to beat them up. But I've had to work on my tolerance. I've had to accept that other people has as much right in this world as I do. And I don't know what's going on in their life today. They may be in an emergency. Maybe they didn't see that big orange truck I drive. Maybe they don't care. That's okay too. That's their choice. All I know today that if I suit up, show up, and do the next right thing, I'm not going to have to take a drink. And that's the bottom line for me, period. I may not like the end results. I may not like where I end up at. Shoot, I don't know if before winter's over, if I'm going to be homeless or not. I don't really give a shit. As long as I'm sober. Because if I'm sober, something will come through. Something will happen. And if I keep applying myself and doing the next right thing and being of service and reaching my hand out and talking to newcomers when I get to, But I only get to come to 3, maybe 4 meetings a week. And it really sucks. I hate it. But guess what? I'm the one that put myself in that position. So, the Sunday morning speaker meetings stuck with me. Saturday high noon group is stuck with me. And every once in a while I can float in another meeting that I get to go to during one of the other days. But other than that, because, I'm not foolish enough to try and drive in Missoula, Montana before 8 o'clock in the morning because it's nutso out there. I'm not foolish enough to drive in Missoula, Montana between 2 and 6 o'clock in the evenings because it's just as crazy. So I'm very specific at times I get to do my work. And that's the other nice thing about it. With DoorDash, I get to make that choice. I have to be totally and completely responsible for them choices. Because if I don't make the choice, there ain't going to be no money coming in, period. There ain't no sick pay. There ain't no time off with pay or any of that. It's all done and over with. So, no matter what's going on in your life today, no matter what, stop, take a breath, and don't pick up that next drink. And it'll work out. I can guarantee a couple things are going to happen, most likely, because they always happen to me. So I can assume that they might happen to you. I'm not guaranteeing it. Number one, it's never ever going to be the way you think it's going to be, as long as you're not drinking. Number two, if you reach your hand out to help somebody else, you'll feel better. You'll feel better. And that can be as simple as showing up and helping with the coffee, reaching out and shaking somebody's hand when they come in the door, walking around with the coffee pitcher and giving people coffee, smiling. God, that's another amazing thing. I found in the rooms of AA that I got taught. I didn't learn, I got taught how to give an appropriate hug to a female without copping the feel. Because that's how it was. I don't do that anymore. And the other amazing thing that's happened, there's been some moms in the rooms of AA that have got where they trust me enough to let me hold their babies. And I seem to do a pretty amazing job at it. It still kind of baffles me. They seem to like me. And I've held quite a few babies in the rooms of AA during meetings so their moms could have a break and enjoy the meeting. Yeah. So as long as I don't pick up that next drink, and I hope you guys are sick of me saying that because maybe it'll stick. If I don't pick up that next drink, I got a chance at having a life. That's all I got.